Welcome back to the Global Ledger. I'm Justin. When a country runs out of foreign currency, when capital flees, markets close, or reserves vanish, there's one institution that almost always appears in the story, and that's the International Monetary Fund, the IMF. Some people describe it as the IMF, and people think of the IMF as a global lender of last resort, or stabilizing force, or financial firefighter. And other people, on the other side, see it as an enforcer, or a disciplinary, or a last-ditch supervisor. Today's episode is about clarifying what the IMF actually is, and just as importantly, what it's not. Because the IMF does not operate like a central bank, and misunderstanding its role leads to a lot of confusion. Let's get into it. Let's begin with definitions. A lender of last resort has three core characteristics. Number one, it can create liquidity on demand. Number two, it can lend freely against collateral. Number three, it can do so without solvency constraints. The definition works inside a domestic system, but globally there is no single authority with those powers. The IMF does not print dollars, it does not issue reserve currency, and it cannot expand its balance sheet elastically. Okay, that matters. The IMF is best understood as a crisis manager, not a global central bank. Its role is to provide temporary foreign currency financing, coordinate international support, restore confidence, and impose conditions meant to stabilize balance sheets. IMF lending is limited in size. It's really conditional, and that by design, and politically constrained. It is not meant to replace markets. It's meant to buy time. Unlike central banks, the IMF funds itself through member country quotas, pooled reserves, and borrowing arrangements. This means IMF resources are really finite, very negotiated, and dependent on global cooperation. The IMF cannot simply expand lending because demand rises, right? Its constraints are real and very, very visible. IMF lending always comes with conditions, not because the institution enjoys discipline, but because it cannot lend without addressing solvency risk. If you look at the IMF programs, they usually target fiscal imbalances, currency mismatches in currency, banking system fragility, and external financing gaps. Without conditions, IMF lending would delay adjustment, encourage capital flight, and increase losses. Conditionally is not punishment, it's risk management. So why do countries turn to the IMF? Countries go to the IMF when markets are closed, reserves are depleted, capital controls, we talked about that one, if they're looming, and or domestic policy has lost credibility. IMF involvement is often a signal that private funding is stopped. In that sense, IMF programs mark the end of market financing and the beginning of restructuring. The IMF is not a global backstop. This is the key limitation. Okay, the IMF cannot provide unlimited dollar liquidity, stabilize global funding markets, or replace any cross-border banking. Okay, those functions live elsewhere, which is why IMF support often coincides with capital controls, debt restructuring, and painful adjustment. The IMF manages crisis. It doesn't prevent them. Okay, and this fits into Arc 7 because everything that we've built, from reserve currencies, trade finance, dollarization, capital controls, offshore dollar creation, the IMF appears when the global dollar system stops functioning normally. It operates at the boundary between national balance sheets and global finance. It's the institution of last coordination. That one way to put it, but not last liquidity. And IMF programs are controversial because they expose underlying imbalances. They force adjustment and they reveal constraints that people may not want to reveal. Countries. Crises don't create weakness. They really reveal it, okay? And the IMF simply makes that revelation explicit. So this leads us directly to the next question. If some countries run persistent deficits, if others accumulate persistent surpluses, if capital flows recycle continuously, is the world suffering from a global savings glut, maybe? Or is that phrase masking something else? In the next episode, episode 68, we'll explore global savings glut. Myth, is it a reality, or is it an accounting identity? Because once you understand crises, institutions, and capital flows, the question becomes whether global imbalances are behavioral or simply structural. Thank you for listening to episode 67 of The Global Ledger. I'm Justin, and thanks for being here.